Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to today's CMS Wire webinar. My name is Alec. As always, I'm here today to help answer any general or technical questions. But before we get started, I'd like to take some time to welcome you and thank you for taking time out of your day and joining us for how to improve ROI by integrating visual assistants into your CX toolkit. Really appreciate you all taking time out of your busy schedules and joining us for this. Here's a loose overview of the agenda. Don't hold me to these numbers. I say this all the time to you regulars out there. These will change as the conversation flows. If you have a question at any point during today's presentation, please do not hesitate to submit that. Click on the Ask a Question tab below our webcams right now. Type that question in and click Submit. If it's content related, we should have some time for some audience questions towards the end of the presentation. But if it's a technical question, knock on wood, we do not need this. If you're facing any tech issues, send that in the Ask a Question tab, and I'll work with you directly in the background to get your issues resolved. You can let us know where you're joining in from by clicking on the audience chat and chat with your fellow attendees about today's content there. Just click on the audience chat, also below the webcams, right below the Ask a Question tab. They are two separate things, so if you have questions, be sure to submit those in the questions tab, and if you want to just chat in the chat there. I am producing today's show from the far southwest suburbs of Chicago. Let us know where you're joining from. I like to see where we get that mixture. It's always kind of fun to see. Here's a little bit about CMS Wire. If you're here, you probably do know who we are, but if you don't and you're new, welcome and thanks for joining us. We were founded in 2003. We cover three primary topic areas: the digital customer experience, the digital workplace, and information management. You can read some of our great content, register for upcoming webinars just like today's, our conferences. We have Digital Workplace Experience coming up, and then DX Summit here in a couple weeks, our final virtual events of the year. You can register for those there on cmswire.com. We also have a mobile app that you can download in your app store of choice and take us with you on the go. All right, I'm very happy to be joined by today's sponsors over at Streem. It's been very fun to learn about them and what they do. And the team over there has been great to work with. So Streem was founded to help companies connect with their customers in new and more useful ways. Streem Core is an enterprise-class remote visual assistance tool using out-of-the-box augmented reality capabilities. By adding a no-download video collaboration tool, companies can quickly see and solve remotely, accelerating diagnosis and support resolution time. So like I said, I have enjoyed my time working with them as we prepared for today's event, and you can find out more about them at streem.com. All right, you can see both my guests here on the screen, and they're going to be talking with you all today, but we got Seth Earley there. You can see him. And then we have Jóhann Hannesson, the head of web development over at Streem. And Seth is the founder and CEO of Earley Information Science, and he's going to get things started. And Jóhann's going to be coming in here and there to give some context and give you some great tidbits to take away. So, Seth, I'm going to start with you. Take it away.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. And as you can see here, I have authored a book called The AI-Powered Enterprise. And for folks on this call, I would like to offer you a copy of that book. So if you send me an email, Seth@earley.com, don't forget the E before the Y, SETH at EARLEY.com, I will get a signed copy to you. So that's for you guys here today. And you can also connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to do this. Now, notice it says augmented reality, virtual reality, and real-time video. We're really going to be talking more about visual support. Augmented reality, virtual reality, those are really kind of aspirational in a lot of ways. But the things I'm going to talk about in terms of foundation, in terms of what you need to do to get this right, are really the baby steps, are really the things that are the precursors to doing any of this stuff. So we won't talk as much about virtual reality, but we will talk about video. We'll talk about contextualizing content and information, no matter what that use case is. And that's really the critical pieces. So when you start looking at this, so here's our agenda. We're going to talk about visual support. We're going to talk about the benefits and why it's really important. I'm going to really focus on the foundation, right? What do you need to have in place to make this work, right? How do you need to be able to understand your use cases, your support processes, your content, and I'm going to get into component content. If anybody's heard me speak before, you've probably heard me talk a little bit about things like taxonomies and metadata and knowledge architecture. And this will be no different. I will still hit on those topics because I think they are really table stakes to doing all of this stuff. And it's really about getting people the right information at the right time in the context of their task. Who are they? What are they trying to accomplish? What are their objectives? What are the problems they're facing? And I always say the customer experience and the customer journey is always a knowledge journey. So being able to have that knowledge house in order and being able to contextualize that information, both for your support reps and your internal people, but for your customers, whether it's self-service or whether it's that rep getting that information out to them, whether it's a virtual assistant or a bot or a troubleshooting type of a program, whatever it is, it's always about getting them that information that specifically solves their problem. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the other aspects of this. But before we jump in, what I would like to do is launch a poll. And Alec, if you can do that, this is just to kind of get a sense of where you guys are in your journey. Where are you in terms of visual support? Are you using it today? Is it on your radar? What's the status of this? Is it something that you've operationalized? All right, where are you on that particular journey? So if you can go ahead and provide that information. Now, I don't see the actual choices here in my screen, in my UI, but I know what they are.
Yep, you'll see them rolling in here shortly, Seth. Once we get some results starting to come in, you see them on the right side of that box.
There's a blank screen for me for a little while. So whether you're using it at all, you're not using it, whether it's informal, whether it's integrated into your stack, or if it's none of the above. If it's none of the above, just let us know in the questions tab or the comments tab or any place else you can put some of the discussion tab. But looks like for right now we have what I want to do is I want to let the popcorn pop for a little while. I know there's a lot of people out there, so let us know what your thoughts are. Are you using it at this point? Some of you not using it informally. Or it's integrated into your support stack. And then the question is, where do you need to go next if it is integrated in your support stack? So let me give you another minute or two. Please go ahead and respond if you would. I don't see a lot more information coming in, so I'm going to just go ahead and share this. Oh, there's one more. One more. Do we have one more? Do we have another? Come on, guys. Come on, pay attention.
Going once, going twice.
Beginning of the webinar, you have to be paying attention. We can't be waiting. All right, I'll go ahead and share this. It looks like it's pretty evenly divided. So it looks like a lot of people are. No one gave us the none of the above. So people are either using it not using it informally, or it is integrated, and it looks like it's pretty evenly divided there. So that's fine. That looks okay. Not unexpected. So let me talk a little bit about this from the perspective of the support drivers. Why is this important? Well, first of all, we're getting much more complex customer installations, right? Tech stacks are more difficult. Products are more complex. They're more sophisticated. There's more bells and whistles, and there's more knobs and dials and levers that you need to pull and push and adjust in order to get things working right? Especially, when you're talking about networks and routers and computer equipment and so on, but lots of stuff, physical installations, physical plants, a lot in the B2B space. In organizations that are providing customer support, there's high turnover, right? That's always been the case. And when we start to get into situations where we do have much more complex environments and we do need support engineers, and many times, especially in B2B and complex equipment environments, those people are in short supply. Many times they come from the field. They have years of experience. They're engineered. They're field service engineers. And of course, we're trying to make sure that we can get that support out to the customer. And the whole idea here is that customers have increasing levels of expectation. Jóhann, did you want to talk a little bit about some of the trends that go along with this?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got some market analysis data here that we've pulled, but this also really mirrors a lot of what we see in conversations with our customers, which is, we're continually adding channels, right? Everybody's trying to meet their customers where they are. And so now, like you mentioned, we're adding chat, we're adding, some folks are reaching out via text. There's, of course, the traditional, phone tree support, but that surface area continues to grow because everybody wants convenience. They want to get resolution quickly. But it's really in tension with all of that pressure that we're feeling in terms of, the unemployment rate, the lack of, qualified folks being available to be hired for CX workloads, turnover, so you can think about that stack growing, and then you want qualified people who are good at, managing that entire stack of channels. So is there a solution that both gets you closer to the customer and also helps you with that retention piece for your existing workforce? And what we were finding is that, the visual support angle is actually helping address both of those items, where, both customer and employee satisfaction are going up, which is kind of counter to the other trends that we're seeing, where you add more overhead and it just gets more stressful, right? It's harder to provide a good experience, and it's harder to, get things resolved as you expect when the environment gets more complex.
Yeah, and you hit on a good point here. It's not just about the customer experience; it's about the employee experience, right? So when you really pressure people and you don't give them enough training time, you don't give them enough tools, the right tools, they're going to stress out, right? And they're going to say, this is for the birds. I don't want to do this. So you really want to be able to make that environment easier for your employees, support them with the tools so that they can support customers, and then everybody will have a better experience. And I like to say that this is the motherhood and apple pie, right? When we talk about benefits, right? We don't say, oh, we're going to increase your time per incident, and we're going to decrease your first call resolution, and you're going to have lower customer satisfaction. Right? Everything always has these outcomes, right? But these are the things that you can measure. I think the real critical thing here is being able to reduce service calls, reduce truck rolls, right? You want to be able to solve that problem. And sometimes you need that visual information, whether it's getting that diagnostic, looking at what customers are seeing, or giving them instructions, or giving the rep instructions. So in both cases, we want to make sure that we reduce those on-site service calls. There's also another piece of this of extending geographic reach. Imagine that you're professional services, you're a contractor, or someone who needs to go on site, insurance inspector, go on site, look at a property, look at equipment, and you need to provide some kind of proposal. You can do that remotely, right? Increasingly, people are doing that remotely, extending the geographic reach. And then the other piece that that is also part of this is reducing the time to value for new hire, because if you contextualize this information correctly, so you can push it out at the right time, you can make it available to your agents and your hires at the same time. You give it to them in the context in which they need it. We're building some virtual assistant application for a financial services company, and it's all about servicing that customer service rep, right? It's all about helping them get to exactly the information they need when a call comes in, when a text comes in, when they have a problem. You can listen real time, and you can also provide this visual information both for the customer and for the rep. And that makes it easier for people to solve those problems more quickly, right? So there's a huge benefit there. Jóhann, do you want to talk a little bit about some of these KPIs?
Yeah, absolutely. Touching on exactly what you talked about, that time to train new hires, Traeger is really a great example of that. One of our customers who is seeing, they have a seasonal business like a lot of folks do. They'll have to bring on, hundreds of support reps at a time for the busy season. Folks are buying grills for the summer, right? And so that workload increases massively. And so they're talking about, how do we get that context built really quickly? How do we extend the reach of those agents to the full geographic area that we're serving and selling in? And by adding in visual support, they're seeing very high customer satisfaction. A note that we don't have on here is their rep satisfaction is also in the high 90s, because what the reps are seeing is, when you can watch a video of somebody else who's well-trained on the product helping a customer, and you've got that recording, that's a training session for your reps too, right? So that learning is now immediately reusable, as opposed to having somebody walk through a script of saying, now tell them to look at this part of the grill. That's very unintuitive, right? But if you can see it, you're learning that instantaneously. Right. And of course, the metrics of solving that problem, the first time with a video call, their warranty spend is way down, because those reps, they're trained quickly, they're able to get on the call, they're able to direct a customer to point to the side of the grill where maybe a piece is missing. Oftentimes, the grills were dirty, right? That was the thing that they were finding out, is your grill's not broken. You just need to give it a good rinse. And they tell them how to do that. They tell them what products to use, and the issue is resolved. No part needs to get sent. The grill doesn't have to be returned. And it's a huge return on investment for them. And the customer feels really well served, right? They've learned something, quick resolution, and they had some good rapport with that agent.
Great. That's great. Yeah, those make a lot of sense. And again, you're trying to reduce the amount of time that you're spending with folks, but you also don't want to take product back when there's nothing wrong with it. So what do you need to do this? First of all, good support processes, meaning understanding the context, understanding the steps to the process, understanding how you're troubleshooting, what are the different classes of problem that you have? And that should be part of a knowledge base. I should have thrown another survey in here about knowledge bases and where you are in your knowledge journey, because surprisingly enough, a lot of support organizations don't have really good structured knowledge bases. And what we're doing here is we're adding another component to that knowledge base. We're adding visual assets, video assets. So you need a digital asset management capability in order to do this. So the structured knowledge, the knowledge that you can use to contextualize exactly what that problem is, get to the right procedure, get to the right solution, understand the error code, understand these different scenarios, and be able to pull up that information exactly in that right context is really part of the table stakes here. The diagnostic procedures, the clean product information, right? Especially if you have a lot of products, you need to make sure it's the right product. You're getting to the right information for the right product for the problem. And the content is contextualized, right? It's saying, oh, what do I need for step B in this, 5-step process for this product with this error code, with this problem, with this type of customer, right? And the customer data is also very important. It's understanding something about their knowledge. It's understanding something about their capability. It's understanding, whether it's a business to business, business to consumer, right? Really getting that first party data about your customer has to be integrated into this process, because this really is a personalization process, right? You're really contextualizing and personalizing content for those users, for those customers, for your rep and for your customer. And with this, we need a content model, right? So we need to model the information that we are presenting back. And that goes into, componentized content. It goes into a number of different pieces. Now I've lost my pointer I'm using two monitors. Oh, there it is. Okay. So now, you start thinking, well, what is component content? Well, first of all, it's breaking something up, a large monolithic document. Hey, you could send them the product manual, right? 300 pages, 200 pages, 100 pages. It doesn't matter. It's a big monolithic document. It's not helpful. Like, people want to read the manual, right? But you can start to break it into pieces that are reusable, right? Installation, configuration, troubleshooting. And again, those are reusable components. Usually they're used for things like translation, localization, managing complex product configurations, right? Because when you have more product configurations, you have different pieces of content that go with those different configurations. So component content is likely used in your organization, but you can also use it to provide that content in the context for the customer rep, that just-in-time training, that service rep coaching. All of those things are part of it. It's real-time assistance because you're pulling out exactly what you need to solve that specific problem. Now, how do we do this? Well, first of all, I mentioned the manual, right? Manuals, you want to here, solve your problem, right? They require study. It takes too long to find things. What's the phrase? RTFM, read the friggin' manual. TLDR, too long, didn't read, right? Or we can say, okay, besides, scenario one, here's the manual. We could say, look in chapter 4. I think your answer's there. Or you could say, wait a minute, here's the specific answer in chapter 4 from that manual. Or you can get into truly contextualized knowledge. Here is the specific answer from the manual and related information based on your configuration and your context. Well, when we say context, what do we mean by context? What is the customer's context? We have to think about that. How do we describe their context? It could be their technical capability. It could be their proficiency. It's their specific problem. It's their tasks. It's the equipment that they own. It's the type of customer. It's information about their installation notes, their as-built plan, the error codes, the configuration, the device, all of this stuff, the past trouble tickets. Have they seen this problem before? All of these things are part of the customer context. This is the customer data model. This is first-party data. These are the things that are going to give you context. Actually, all of these elements will give you context, but this is how we contextualize content, by understanding these elements about the customer. And if I take this back to my other diagram, I can start to say, first of all, we have to understand the use case. You have to understand the audience, as I mentioned. You have to understand the tasks, and you do that using metadata. When we say using metadata, well, what do we mean by that? Well, first of all, you take a piece of content, you take those reusable components. Those can be images, those can be diagrams, those can be videos. They are tagged with identifiers, the isness and aboutness. This is an installation guide. It is about this product, this model, this serial number, right? And what that becomes is core metadata. That is, everything has to have that information about the products. Now, if we want to go to configuration, the isness there, so we have isness and aboutness. When I say isness, what is this thing? It is a product manual. What is this? It's an installation guide. What is this? It's a configuration part of the manual. Configurations, it's a troubleshooting guide. When I start looking at this, I say, okay, I need to tag this with aboutness. What product is this installation for? What model is it for? What's the serial number or the specific information that's the identifier? So now when we go to the next step and we say configuration, well, I need more than the product name and the model and the serial number. I need the settings. I need the setup step. That becomes additional contextualized metadata. And if I look at troubleshooting, same idea. I have that core metadata, but then I have other stuff. There's an error code, there's a symptom, there's a troubleshooting step. These are all the so I can present it back to the user, so I can give it to the rep, so I can present it to the customer. That's what contextualizes this information. And again, visual assets, right? We need to be able to identify why those visual assets are important, what they're for, what product, what step, what problem, what solution, what anything, right? All of these things need to be done. You know, and when you start thinking about describing things, you know, language is difficult. Oh, wait a minute, it's a flashing green light on the left. This is the third one. Oh no, it stopped flashing. Oh, wait a minute, it's flashing faster now. I mean, a video is, well, I remember doing this with someone and I was looking at the wrong set of lights. I was looking at the lights in the back, not the front, right? It looks like the actuator is rounded. Is that what's supposed to look like? I mean, you can't describe these things. There are two green wires come, oh, wait a minute, they're black. Hold on, I think those are gray. You know what I mean? Because it depends on the judgment, the familiarity with the product, the cleanliness of it, right? Whether it's worn and torn or the labels are hidden. In the verbal descriptions of complex parts and complex equipment becomes very difficult. It becomes error prone and it's difficult to interpret. And that's very, very common. So, you know, picture's worth 1,000 words. So when I say, what do you need to do this and get it right? It's, again, document those support processes. But it's also breaking those manuals, those monolithic manuals into components, building out your first-party data and being able to tag those components with metadata so you can have contextualized consumption. You know, I think we might jump into the other tab. I think there's some more slides down here that we're going to get to for you guys, right? You're going to move to your slides, Jóhann? But yeah, okay. So let's go ahead and do this. I was going to plug my podcast, but I won't plug my podcast now. But it's a great podcast. But let's go ahead and we've already seen this one. Let's go ahead and do the poll. So I don't know how to get to my poll now because I did full screen. Here we go. Maybe that's good. No, now I have you in full screen.
Yeah, I think we've actually hit most of the slides that we want to cover, but I'd love to kind of riff on a couple of the items you brought up about the component system, and you know, we can talk a little bit about how Streem factors in. But what I love that you mentioned is, you know, the sort of visual context and starting from those basic ingredients, because I feel like with visual support, it's really it's a two-way relationship, right? You might be starting with one and not the other. that kind of component knowledge base is also a great base for, a workflow training for an agent who's doing visual support, right? It's almost a one-to-one. Whereas if you're not starting with those components, repeated scenarios that you're running into as a part of your visual support flow should translate directly into troubleshooting guides. They should translate directly into, installation information, right? So there's a two-way kind of symbiotic relationship there. Whichever one you're starting with should help inform the other, right? And strengthen it. And cutting back to Traeger really quickly, they use this exactly in that way. They, after a certain period of time, had done enough volume of visual support calls where they were able to identify, kind of triage the top couple cases, find the ones that really made the most sense as like very easy, hands-off guides for customers. And those were translated into resources that customers could get to directly via their app and via other sources. So not only did they solve those issues for the customer with visual support, they were able to take some of those cases almost completely off the table by moving them into an easily accessible knowledge base and kind of troubleshooting database for their customers. So it really, not only had a benefit when they were triaging that work, it allowed them to eliminate an entire class of support outreach almost completely.
That's great. So again, I'm having a little bit of a technical difficulty here. I cannot see the survey. So Alec, do you want to take that over and show that?
Yeah, I had the survey launched while Jóhann was riffing there, and it looks like we're pretty even across the board on our options at A, B, and C of not on our radar at this stage. Initial phases of investigation, but no funding, and it is a priority with executive attention and budget. So we are dead even on all those, with none of the above coming in last place there. So I'll go ahead and share these results with the audience. And then I don't know if it's time for Q&A, guys, or if you had more stuff to touch on.
I think that's it from my stuff. I wanted to really hit on the component authoring and talk about those pieces. So I'm open to Q&A. And Jóhann, is there anything else you wanted to go back over on your slides?
I think those were the big rocks, really. I think one thing that maybe we can tee up as well, because I'm sure this is a question for the folks that are investigating this and wondering about the value, is where would I get started, and is there like an easy way to kind of validate this kind of approach? And I think the answer is definitely, and a lot of folks already have that documented somewhere. They're just not thinking about it in that context. So if you have a form where you're asking for uploaded photos of a particular product, and that gets sent into some email queue, or if you've got a chatbot configured that says like describe the visual of something, those all directly translate into a use case that could benefit from visual assistance. And I think to your point, for the componentized documentation, it applies there as well. Looks like we lost Seth there for a second. There he is.
He's coming back in here.
But yeah, those are great entry points where you can kind of identify a potential test case for where you would want to trial out using visual support. So you're already asking for those things. Any place where you're using language to describe a visual diagnosis is where you can apply some kind of remote assistance to get started. So a lot of that already exists. You just have to kind of invert how you're thinking about it and identify those places in your channels.
Great. My point is always about getting the data right, getting the content right, getting the knowledge base right, understanding those support processes and being able to make sure you can push the right content out to people, right? Especially when you start building out a digital asset library, that's critically important. It's if you can't find it, you can't use it, right? So the only way to find it is to use metadata and to do that tagging. Alec, I see some other questions down here. I was able to get back to my tab. I see one of the questions is, what is the best method to improve ROI? And that's kind of a broad question, right? But I think you have a lot of traditional metrics about the call center, such as time principles. First of all, you need to have baselines. You need to understand where that process is lacking, or where there's friction to the process. And when there's friction to the process, you can build, a model that shows, okay, here's our current baseline, here's what the process is taking now, and then really targeting the intervention to impact that particular metric, right? So you always have to have baselines, and then you have to say, how can we improve that, and how can we measure again? So it's kind of that baseline, intervention, measure again, and you can iteratively do that. Do you want to add to that, Jóhann?
Yeah, I think depending on how you're evaluating it in your business, we look at this in a couple different ways. So there are areas where support directly leads to an expenditure that potentially does not have a huge cost like benefit for your organization. So we think about truck rolls, right? What are the scenarios where you have to send somebody on site? What are the scenarios where you have to escalate to somebody who is, an expert whose time is very expensive? And what are times when you have to do something like an RMA or returning a product entirely, right? Those cases obviously are a huge hit to the business. And oftentimes, with the right support and troubleshooting guides, or with a visual support intervention ahead of time, you can pre-qualify, pre-diagnose, and then just remove a percentage of those truck rolls, remove those RMAs and returns, or prevent having to escalate to somebody whose time is incredibly expensive to your organization. So I think it's a little bit of a question of, where are those costs in your business and your support flows? And if you don't necessarily have those, we also like to think about, what is your time to resolution? Is it taking multiple phone calls for somebody who just can't quite describe what their router is doing, right? Could you get that from 3 calls to 1 call? If you could just get them to point their camera at the side of it, circle that button, have them press it, and they're good to go. So now your time to resolution has dropped. So I think either way, depending on what's having the biggest impact on your organization, those can lead to really significant ROI improvements.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Jóhann, I think I need this to help my parents whenever they need help with their router. Instead of trying to explain things to them, I could just draw it out for them right there. I can't tell you how many hours have been spent on the phone trying to do that exact scenario. Not necessarily customer, but helpful nonetheless. We're going to get into some more audience questions here, guys. And this question I'm going to tee up to you first, Jóhann. It comes from Nicole. Nicole's question is, and apologies while I read it off my second monitor. I'm not looking at you guys, but the question is, the AR, VR video solutions are the terminus of a customer journey that crosses many business functions. How do you recommend taking baby steps when those departments are in various stages of process maturity and there might be competing priorities?
Yeah, it's a good question, because obviously I think it is sort of like it's a cost and investment curve, right? There's visual support just generally, potentially many of you are already doing that by asking for photos to be sent in, right? Then there's the video support component. Then there's AR layered on top of that. Are you doing something with that live video? Are you highlighting things? Are you pulling them out? Or you're getting into VR, which is very advanced, right? There's a lot of investment up front. You're creating assets. It's a wholly realized experience, big spend. So what I typically see for a lot of our customers who are evaluating this is, they're starting by adding in visual support as basically a component that you can add as part of your triage or escalation workflow. So for Streem, what we allow you to do is just drop in a link that can be sent to a user's mobile device, and that kicks off a call directly in the browser and allows you to start a visual support session. And it's a very easy thing to layer in, right? If you've already got a text chat going with a customer, if you're on the phone with them, you can send them to a short URL and give them a code. It's an easy way to escalate. And that way you can start to evaluate, what are those things that typically are resolved best or are escalated best to a visual support workflow. And that's going to start telling you, these are the kinds of problems, these are the kinds of support cases, troubleshooting or installation that is really starting to benefit from a visual support angle. So you just kind of keep that in reserve, or identify a few core use cases. Like I mentioned earlier, is there a return that is constantly happening due to a faulty part? Or is there a particular use case where you're having to send out, a technician, or, activate that, top tier support person who is, a product expert, or maybe it's an engineer, who knows? Those are great cases where you can just insert this as a step beforehand and evaluate how much of that cost can we cut out, and then scale from there.
All right. I'll send this next question to you here, Seth, and thank you, Jóhann, for that. The question comes from an attendee named Guy. Guy's question is, what is your best advice to write an effective data dictionary, as you were talking about data earlier?
Sure. Well, it comes back to the content that you have and being able to identify the different ways of describing that content. So when we say data dictionary, we need to understand the unstructured content, and we also need to understand the ways of describing our customer. So it's more than a data dictionary. It's really a content model and customer attribute model. And the way to do that is to look at all of your content. So what are all those assets that you have? You certainly have, product manuals, as I mentioned, and you have support processes, and you have troubleshooting guides. And it's taking an inventory of all of those different assets, all of those different text assets, all the different visual assets, the diagrams, the drawings, any video, step-by-step. And it's being able to organize those using essentially multiple taxonomies. We start off with a content type. What is this thing? I mentioned isness. And then if I have a pile of, let's say it's a product manual. If I have 100 or 1,000 product manuals in a pile, how do I tell them apart, right? I tell them apart by the name of the product or the category of the product. If I have 100 troubleshooting guides, how do I tell those apart? If I have an installation guide, again, we start looking at those different elements that define the isness of that piece of content, and then the aboutness, the other descriptors, the attributes. So the mind map I showed you that looked at the customer says, what are all the different ways we can describe our customers? And what do we know about our customers? And what can we learn? Are they technically proficient, or are they technically less advanced, right? Do they have a great deal of familiarity with this product? Are they professionals versus lay people? And so all of those things are going to help us tailor the exact piece of information that we need to give them. Things like, well, what's the product telling us, right? Is it throwing an error code? If so, we need to be able to document those error codes and saying, well, okay, what's the solution to that particular error code? So it's identifying those different assets. It's identifying the processes. And again, part of it is also saying, how do we measure those processes? So part of the data is, okay, when we open a call, how do we tag that call, right? We need to understand what product it's for, what kind of problem they're facing. We need to understand something about the customer. And then we need to say, well, what can we measure? Again, we mentioned, having to send a service rep on site. Well, that's a big cost, but we have to document that, right? We have to document the time per incident, first call resolution. There's a lot of different, CSAT scores. There's a lot of different things we need to measure, and we need to have the metadata in order to measure that stuff. So it's the call itself as an entity, right? And that call itself needs descriptors, so we can understand what has happened in that call, and we can say, when we have similar calls, how do we address those problems? And you're also looking for things that are very, very repeatable, so that you can either put in place a self-service option, or you can go back upstream to like product development and say, look, we're seeing these errors over and over again, or these problems over and over again. That has to be fed back into product development, product engineering, product testing, right? Because why are people calling in the first place? Something's broken, right? And many times the call center isn't tasked with solving that problem, but really it should be capturing enough data in order to solve that problem, right? Upstream. So the data dictionary, the content model, the customer attribute model, those are all important things, and they're based on use cases, essentially. When you start defining those libraries of use cases, you can start to say, okay, for this use case, this situation, what do I need? And then how do I identify that exact piece of information and content?
All right. Jóhann, anything to add there?
I love what you ended on there, because it kind of relates to, I think, part of what we've asked in the survey question, and people are talking about, do I have budget for this, right? And so the same attribution questions that go into that taxonomy that you're talking about for your data is also how you can start to prove out ROI if you're running a pilot on something that is visual assistance, right? Because, now you're going to be able to say, for this particular kind of case, this is the third call with the same customer that we've had about this type of product, right? And if you can simply identify the fact that the average number of calls for this kind of case, or let's say this kind of product, went down, there it is. There's your ROI. If you put some visual assistance into the mix, right? That's your calculation. Even better if you can identify as a part of your support escalation when some of those high cost items came into play, like a return, like a technician going on site. It helps both ways.
Right. So all of that's getting into greater granularity, not just looking at the overall agent performance or call center performance. It's saying, for this kind of call, for this kind of product, what were the results? So you really do need to pay attention to that in great detail.
All right, guys, that's all the questions we have. We are caught up. So thank you both for taking the time to be here today. We're going to give some people some time back in their day here. So today's webinar was recorded. You're going to receive a link to that recording in a follow-up email. Keep an eye on your inbox for that. But one more big shout out to Seth and Jóhann for being here and speaking today. And another big shout out to Streem for making today's webinar possible. So if you have any webinar related questions for us here at CMS Wire, or if your company's interested in sponsoring one like today's, email us at webinars@cmswire.com. In the meantime, thank you all for the time, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for having me. Bye now.